fiscally responsible, financial geniuses, monetary magicians. These are things people say about drivers who switch their car insurance to Progressive and save hundreds. Because Progressive offers discounts for paying in full, owning a home, and more. Plus, you can count on their great customer service to help when you need it, so your dollar goes a long way. Visit Progressive.com to see if you could save on car insurance. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Potential savings will vary. Not available in all states or situations.
You're listening to Heritage Radio Network.
Hey, it's Sam Benrubi, and this is The Wine List. The Wine List is a new fast-paced podcast featuring the best-in-class wine guests. Each week, I will ask our guests 5 questions about their current wine and food preferences. The same 5 questions I've asked everyone from day one on the Grape Nation. Get ready for the most diverse and interesting recommendations to try now. We'll also find out what's going on in our guests' world. I want to wish everyone a happy and a healthy new year. This week, we talked to Eric Asimov. Eric is the longtime chief wine critic for the New York Times. His column, The Pour, appears weekly online at NewYorkTimes.com and in print every week. He focuses, of course, on the sensorial pleasures of wine, but also with a discussion of wine's culture, history, social, scientific, and environmental dimensions. It has now become a tradition that Eric joins us at the beginning of each year to discuss the past and coming wine year. All right, Eric, I want to jump right into it and start with the wine list, a list that you've answered in the past. Welcome back to the Grape Nation and the Wine List. Great to have you.
Always happy to be with you.
All right, so question number 1. The question is, what are you drinking now? And this is a tricky question because of who you are. What I'm really interested in is what's Eric drinking? Like when you go to a restaurant or you're making a burger and you want to crack a bottle of wine, or if I opened your fridge, what's the type of stuff you're drinking now?
Well, honestly, I will drink anything.
Okay.
But, one thing that I've really been into over the last year in going to restaurants and just looking for good white wine that is not super expensive, because I don't know if you've noticed the prices in New York restaurant wine lists are just
yes,
astronomically climbed. So I've been drinking Fiano di Avellino.
Okay. That's Sicily, right?
That's Campania.
Campania, my bad.
Campania,
right.
Yeah. And there's some just really good, clean, crisp, resonant wines that I've been finding. So
great quality to value there.
Absolutely.
Well, anything else?
Well, I will probably answer similarly to last year, Chianti Classico.
Yes, I was not going to bring that up. I was going to wait for you to bring it up.
Beaujolais, I'm drinking a lot of different natural wines.
Okay.
A lot of smaller producers from California and Oregon.
Okay.
Some New York Riesling, a lot of good German Riesling, German Pinot Noir, German Chardonnay.
Yes, you did an article, I think, on Salwa.
Yes. And German sparkling wine.
Which, is that Sekt or no?
Zekt.
Yes. Okay.
That is historically, the category where they relegated their underripe grapes. But this is completely transformed in the last 10 or 20 years, and German sparkling wines right now are superb.
Meaning it's good stuff now.
Good stuff.
All right, so those are great. Those are great ones. one last question on that.
A lot of
Is it
Spanish wines.
okay?
Now you're making me really think about stuff.
Spanish wine from all over the country, though, right?
Spain is, for me, like the most exciting country for wine right now. So, every corner of Spain has, experienced a kind of revolution in the last 10 to 20 years.
Yeah, I think you're going to be hearing more about it. All right, those are great answers as I expected. The second question sometimes, sounds like the goofiest one. What is your favorite wine and food pairing? Not what is the classic wine and food pairing, but it's probably something you don't eat, every week, every month, or whatever. But what resonates with you?
I don't really think of wine and food pairings anymore. This sounds like a really odd thing to say.
But is that an evolution? Like you felt
yes. I mean,
differently?
I used to, if you had asked me this question 20 years ago, I would have been, thinking, very, very thoughtful about what goes with what. But with experience, I have discovered that pretty much anything goes with anything. With rare exception, if you have good wine and good food, it's not going to be a huge problem.
Right. Don't overthink it.
Yeah. That being said, I love Northern Rhone Syrah. So Northern Rhone Syrah with roast chicken is a great pairing. Aligoté with pasta and seafood. Generally, shellfish pasta is a great pairing, even though that doesn't conform to any regional category.
Like if you said muscadet and oysters or shellfish, that's a regional, pairing and all that.
Right.
But,
exactly.
But that plays into drink what you want with what you want.
Yes. And, and I play around with this sometimes. I will try white wines with, red meat and red wines with, something that you would ordinarily have a white wine with.
Right.
And, I've gone to the, I've gone to just drinking what I want with.
So let me ask you to that point. Will you maybe try a white with, let's say, a bloody steak? I don't want to box it into that, but you'll try something with something, and at the end you'll say, "Listen, I enjoyed the food, I enjoyed the wine, but that wasn't really."
I mean, there is that element. I did a story many years ago about red wine with oysters because it was like a fad in Paris for some reason.
Okay.
And I found a bunch of red wines that, they were pretty good with oysters, but I'm still going to prefer a Chablis or a Muscadet or, any kind of like good crisp white wine. I will say that my wife's birthday was within the last week, and she wanted fried chicken, so we had to have fried chicken and champagne, which never disappoints.
Of course, that's always a great one. That's on the top of a lot of people's lists. All right.
Yes.
Third question. I'm going to ask you the question, and I'll just explain it away a little. The question is, and I've asked you this before, what is your favorite wine restaurant and/or bar? And that could be anywhere. Now, here's the explanation part. I'm not asking you to list them or number them or your favorite. If you're comfortable enough, I want you to throw around places that you've encountered where the list is great. It's either tight and very cool, it's inventive, it's big, it's thoughtful, the environment you're in is nice, the people there are knowledgeable. Do places come to mind anywhere?
Absolutely. For the last year, since we last spoke, restaurant wine prices, that's been on my mind constantly because I see so many places really trying to maximize their margins in wine, which I think speaks to the underlying dysfunction of the standard restaurant business model. So I've been collecting places, and I did a column on this, 12 places in New York that really do a great job of hitting all ends of the wine list, not just with, a few throwaway wines under $100, but with a very thoughtful selection.
Right.
And I
Can
would
you name
put
a few?
absolutely the Ops Pizza restaurants totally fits in that category.
Yes.
Winson Bakery and Restaurant maybe has the lowest markups of any restaurant in New York.
And he opened in Manhattan not that long ago.
Yes, it's great.
Yeah.
The three restaurants in the Crevette, Lords, and Dame, all within a few square blocks of Greenwich Village, have wonderful wine lists. Particularly Lords, you can get very high end bottles there, but the lower end is fantastic.
Yeah.
Lay, the new
Annie Shee.
Annie Shee's new wine bar in Chinatown, aside from having wonderful food, it's got a great list at all prices. Sailor in Brooklyn does a really good job.
Yep.
Yeah. And I want to also mention, because this restaurant wasn't open, or this wine bar was not open when I wrote my article, but Stars, the new wine bar from the Claude and Penny people,
yes,
like at the restaurants, you can get all the, multi-$100 bottles of Burgundy that you might want, but they have on their list 88 bottles, all $88 or under, a really excellent selection of good values.
Very thoughtful owners, very thoughtful lists, great environments. A couple of shameless plugs. One of the last episodes of the Grape Nation was with Annie Shee when she was just opening Lay. And the first episode of the wine
I just want to plug my colleague, Legea Michon, who just wrote a wonderful review.
I was going to say, your publication gave them 2 stars.
Yes.
I think this week.
Congratulations. Brava, Annie.
Yeah. And Ed Szymanski was our first guest on the wine list. And
Ed does such a great job, Ed and Patricia.
For all the reasons you mentioned, that's why I sought Ed out, because he's just this thoughtful, soulful guy. And he's truly a chef, but he's really an intense wine guy. It's very personal to him.
Yes.
All right. So those are great ones. And I do post these. And the reason, I ask is to give our listeners some good opportunities, and by posting them, we have access to them. All right. So the fourth question, you've answered this before, and it may be the same. It's an opportunity to change or reconfirm. But the question is your favorite all-time wine. When I initially structured the question, I was sort of going after, and you're as good as anyone. Guy like Aldo Somme is good. What's the most expensive rare wine? I don't give a crap about that anymore. What's the wine that resonates the most with you today? Either was a gateway, opened your eyes. Maybe it was when you were starting. Maybe it was when you're in the middle of things. Is there a wine that really rung your bell?
I've been doing this a long time, and I'm happy to say that I continue to have epiphanies.
Nice.
We keep learning, we keep trying new wines, but the one that came to mind, and I could answer this question differently, no matter how many years we do this together, Sam, I'll always have a different answer for you, I think. But right now, I'm dreaming about one of the great wines I ever had, and maybe that was spurred on by my mentioning of Northern Rhone before.
Right.
1988 Gentes Dervio Côte Rôtie. This is the epitome of the old school Côte Rôtie.
Yeah.
Gentes was making wines when Côte Rôtie was kind of a backwater. When Kermit Lynch first started importing his wines, like in the late 70s, and he talks about how nobody went up to Côte Rôtie at that time.
Right.
And, he visited this guy in his cellar with a dirt floor and, the big old barrels that he had been using forever. And the wines were magical. I've been lucky enough to have a bunch of them. And there's a funny story with that wine. How you always dream of finding the restaurant with this unbelievable catch of great wines that nobody knows about.
Right.
Usually in the middle of nowhere. I found my version of that in New York City. This was about 15 years ago.
Okay.
And they had like about 3 or 4 bottles of the Gentes 88, along with a bunch of other great wines. And I had 2 bottles of the Gentes. They were so great. I mean, it's just one of the greatest wines I've ever had, and one of the most soulful wines.
Unfortunately,
And I made a deal with the sommelier there that I would get that last. She had 1 bottle left, and I would get it. And we shook
that's
hands
great.
on it.
That's
But what happened was a guy who's in the wine business here in New York, who I will forever hold against him, heard about this wine there. And when the sommelier was not there, he bribed the bartender at the restaurant to sell it to him. And he took it.
That's terrible. Well, that happens. That's a great one. I was going to say, unfortunately, there's just not that much of it around. So.
No, it's that's a bygone producer. It doesn't exist anymore, although the vineyards are in other people's hands.
Right, I know that. All right, so here's the final question, and I'm not going to put the pressure on you, but I think singularly, you may be the in caps, most qualified person in the 10 years of the Grape Nation and the Wine List to answer this question. And understand, I've been asking this question for 10 years. So here's the question. The question is, recommend to me the best wines around 15, 20, 25 bucks. You get why you're the most qualified guy. Let's break it down to categories, red and white. And you can go region, you can go maker, however you want to approach it.
Well, first of all, thank you. I'm flattered. I've spent many years arguing that the best wines, the best values in wine are in that $15 to $25 range. And even as prices have gone up and producers that I used to recommend in that range have now are priced out, I still believe that to be true. And if I had to pick one region, I would pick the Itata region of Chile. This is south of the part of Chile where all the big estates are. It's an area, where they've been growing grapes and making wines for more than a century. And a lot of those grapes were sold to bigger producers, or they were just used locally, never exported, just made what they call pipeño, which is just kind of the local wine that you drink with things. But this is a treasured resource. These old vineyards on granite and other soils, and really good, thoughtful winemakers have discovered these vineyards and are making terrific wines, like Sanso or Pais, which we call Mission, white wines as well, and a lot of them are in that range, and they're just really terrific wines.
So Itata is Itata, right? Itata?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
That's a terrific answer, and I appreciate that, you brought that up and, kind of hopefully prompt people to go out and try it. All right. So as I mentioned, I will post your specific answers.
At Arizona State University, we're bringing world-class education from our globally acclaimed faculty to you. Earn your degree from the nation's most innovative university. Online. That's a degree better. Learn more at asuonline.asu.edu.
All right, let's see what's going on in your world. I want to get into a bunch of things with you. I have you on at the beginning of the year because it's a good time to look back a little and, certainly look forward. So I think you'll agree 2025 was a tumultuous year for wine, to say the least. You had tariffs.
Absolutely.
You had a continued drop in consumption. You had the ongoing challenges of climate change. There's a new generation of wine drinkers. What were some of the important stories to you for 2025?
Well, those were really the governing stories of the year.
Well, let's take tariffs first.
Yes.
Tell me.
I'm about to approach this story again 1 year into tariffs, so
Right.
I don't want to get too much into what I'm going to be talking about in that story, but I will say that tariffs have been instrumental in raising prices on a lot of wines. Not as badly as perhaps we had feared, because I think that a lot of importers did a great job of laying in supplies early on, but I think we're really going to be feeling it in the next few years as those supplies run out.
Is there any truth to the idea that raised prices on imported wines is pushing people to drink domestic wines?
Well, I'm not sure of that. That's part of my what I'm going to be reporting in the next few weeks.
Okay,
but
so we will
I will say,
that.
Yeah, but I will say that I doubt it, because I think that
I agree.
Raising a lot of domestic producers rely on imported goods for their wines. And if their bottles cost more, their barrels, their winery equipment, their tractors, all of these things are costing them more if they're tariffed. So and beyond that, a lot of the American wines are distributed by people who also import wines, and a lot of them will try to equalize the pain. So, the idea that it's going to drive people to tariffs on imports are going to drive people to domestic wines is just, I don't think is true. And case in point, because champagne really has gotten out of hand in terms of prices, I thought this year I'm going to in my obligatory year-end sparkling wine column, I would focus on American sparkling wines.
Good idea.
Aside from the fact that there are many, many really good ones, but you're still like starting at around $40 or
Yep.
so.
Right.
And I'm always going to get complaints from people who, just think who are people. I'm always going to hear from people who complain about prices, regardless of I'm talking about a $20 bottle or a $200 bottle. But, it just made me think that, there are a lot of people for whom no wine will ever be cheap enough.
Right. Well, I want to get into that a little later. So consumption continues to go down. I mean, are there new reasons, or it's just the core reasons continue to be the downfall?
Well, I think I think it's the core reasons, but I'm you know I, let's discuss what those core reasons are.
Okay.
I think that there is definitely a reset going on. Consumption in the U.S. rose, for decades until 2018. Then it went down for a couple of years, and then the pandemic came, and everybody sat home and drank, and
Right.
uncountably, it went way up.
Right.
And once the pandemic ended, it started declining again. So, a lot of people in the industry have used that apogee during the pandemic as their starting point, and that's added to the hand wringing. But if you really think about it, consumption started going down almost 10 years ago. And that puts the U.S. now in line with the historic wine producing world, Europe in particular, where consumption has been going down for decades, for a century, really. And when I say reset, we're all like kind of finding out where consumption is going to lie when wine is not a daily staple in the table, but a special occasion or an extra, a once in a while thing. What is the word for it when you're choosing it out of volition rather than necessity? And for the U.S., it's just kind of you had this historic rise, and now it's just settling down. Now the other core elements are the hand wringing about health concerns,
Right.
and I think that for a year or two, those have those kind of panicked a lot of people. And I'm not saying that that there aren't dangers to alcoholic beverages.
Right.
But I think I personally have concluded that wine can be part of a healthy lifestyle. Everything in moderation. If you're not an addictive person, you can drink wine, and it's just one of many things that will pose low-level risks.
I agree with that.
And I think more people who because we're always moved by trends, and if people tell you that oat bran is good for you, there will be a spike in oat bran consumption, but then it settles down because it's not really great for you. I don't know if you noticed today, but our Health and Human Secretary Human Services, Robert F.
guidelines.
Kennedy Jr., right, upended the dietary guidelines to say that we should all be eating more red meat and saturated fat.
And whole milk.
This goes against actual scientific evidence, just the way pretty much everything that he calls for does. And I think, though, that there may be some people out there who are going to go on the nothing but red meat diet and dip their vegetables in beef tallow or whatever.
It's like the Atkins diet.
Yeah, I think saner heads will prevail, and that too will resettle.
Yeah.
So I think the health issue is it's not going to be with us for forever. What I do think is that, and I'm getting back to the same thing I've been kind of obsessed with all year, are prices. And it's true that Gen Z is not consuming as much.
Well, that was my next question, Eric. There's been an accusation, that consumption with Gen Z is down. But I've recently been reading sort of conflicting articles that they're not necessarily pushing away wine, but embracing it in different ways. What they drink, who they drink.
That may be true.
Natural wines, whatever.
That's what I was going to say. I see that anytime I go into a natural wine bar, and this is all over the country, all over North America, all over Europe, there are tons of young people drinking and enjoying wine. And why is that? First of all, you're not the prices of a lot of natural wines, particularly those that are just in the thirst quenching category, are far more reasonable than anything from Napa Valley, for example. Second, if you go to a natural wine bar, nobody tries to educate you. The people in these bars, and just about any successful wine bar, understand that these are social spaces. People come to have a good time. They want to enjoy wine with their friends. They don't want to be lectured or educated or taught unless they ask for it. And I think that this whole notion that we have to educate the public about wine has contributed to driving a lot of people away from wine. And then, simply the inherent snobbishness, the notion that wine is some sort of aspirational lifestyle, and that you have to have a specialized vocabulary to properly discuss it, that you can't enjoy it unless you know all about it. All of this is nonsense, and this sounds ridiculous, but it, the natural wine bars that I've seen and the young people in these spaces that I've spoken with, all make the point that nobody burdens or assails them for their ignorance. And it's okay. It's just something they can enjoy, like a cupcake or a hamburger. You don't have to study a cupcake to enjoy it.
Well, hamburgers don't have that snobby history, but it should be handled similarly.
Exactly. And people don't feel intimidated by these things, partly because they're a lot more present in their lives. But we haven't created this notion that people who like wine are so-called connoisseurs who know everything. And this is maybe an impossible task, but we have to change the way a lot of people think about wine. When you go into a restaurant, the burden should not be on the consumer unless they're taking charge, but it should not be on the consumer to tell you what kinds of wines they like, to describe the taste of a wine. Um, and this is, there's a responsibility here for the consumer. You have to trust a sommelier. You have to trust a merchant.
Mm-hmm.
You can't feel that you're going to be ripped off at all times. You have to. The transaction that I'd like to see is a consumer goes into a restaurant with a sommelier, says, "Here is my budget. Here's what we're ordering. Could you pick us out something that will go really well with this food that we'll enjoy?"
Yeah, we have to get people to think that way. I totally agree with that. And in past shows, I would say you've brought that idea up every time. Entrust
Probably.
yourself. No, entrust yourself, with the right merchant, when you're in the right type of restaurant, where
But
wine.
that becomes hard if you're going to go into a restaurant where nothing is under $100
Yeah.
on a wine list. And
Yeah.
speaking of Gen Z, restaurants with those sorts of wine lists are the most inhospitable places for younger people.
Yeah.
What you want to introduce young people to wine, but you put nothing in a person's budget. You think of a young person who might be going out on a date and they want to splurge to a certain extent. You're going to a good restaurant, and I'm not talking about Michelin star restaurants.
Right.
I'm talking about places in New York that purport to be neighborhood places, but are very good, and they offer nothing. And wines by the glass are start at $20. It's ridiculous, and I think restaurants have a responsibility to source wines that they can price at lower points. And
Well, you mentioned a bunch of places.
one more thing here. Forgive me. One more thing: the American wine industry has a responsibility. They've tried to compete with the greatest wines of the world, and and they have never really thought about how to make great, inexpensive wines. They're always just commodity wines or knockoffs of expensive wine.
Well,
but there are
I have a question to that point.
Yes.
And it's written in front of me. And I'm going to read it. What I was going to say is wine consumption is dominated by larger companies with a heavy investment in advertising, marketing, and in general, making shitty wine. I mean, is that ever going to change or at least shift? Or
no.
that's the model part, partially.
That's the model because I would say the majority of people who buy wine don't really care about it. You can't just look at the market as a single entity. The majority of people are just buying an alcohol delivery system.
That's it.
They enjoy a buzz. They will buy wine, but if for some reason they decide that hard seltzer is doing it for them, or batched cocktails or cannabis, they'll very swiftly shift their allegiance.
Yeah.
The minority in wine buyers are people who really love wine, who are loyal to it, and probably buy a lot more of, or drink a lot more than people who are,
Right.
just looking for a
Right.
buzz.
Right.
But, these are people who are customers of small producers.
Right.
But these are people also who don't necessarily want to be spending $50 to $100 a bottle retail or more in a restaurant. So there are some producers in California. I will mention Brock Cellars, Mathiasen, just to name two, because I've listed some in print, but I can't think of
But
them
even
off the top of my
smaller
head.
guys like Flores,
Yeah, but even but those are so small that
yeah,
But I'm talking about somebody like Brock Cellars. They will look for grapes outside of the mainstream, so they're not making like a cheap Cabernet
right,
from from Napa Valley, but they're looking for grapes that are grown conscientiously from places of lesser status, and maybe selling them in a liter bottle or. But just trying to Monte Rio, Patrick
right.
Capiello's, he's tried to do that.
He's kept the price down, the
25
quality up.
bucks.
Interesting varietals he has.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We need a lot more of this, a lot more.
So that kind of leads into my next question. When I started the podcast almost 10 years ago, the natural wine movement was really getting its sea legs, at least in New York, because, that's the world I was kind of working in.
Right.
Is there, I always have trouble, with the moniker natural wine. Is there still a so-called natural wine movement, or has it evolved into something else? And what I'm saying is, do people, and you alluded to this, do they now pay more attention to the winemaker, who is now usually smaller? They're usually more thoughtful in their farming and winemaking. A lot of these people are part of generational families, or even, some new people. Is it beyond just the natural wine movement now?
Well, yes, it is, because I think that, in the 21st century, the natural wine movement has been the most important and influential movement in wine. I mean, it still makes up a microscopic part, but its influence has just been tremendous. I mean, that's why, because of natural wine, that's why we're entertaining so many of these unknown varieties. I mean, like Val de Gay in California, or Romarantine, or
Even Trousseau.
Teroldego, or all things that were dismissed by mainstream critics in their their so-called hierarchy of noble grapes. Natural wine did away with that and said, grapes are a democracy too.
Right.
And that has been great. The fact that so many producers who wouldn't necessarily qualify, in the most militant definition of natural wine, or
Right.
The fact that how people farm is a big deal nowadays. That is due to natural wine and how they make wine.
Right.
People may still use small amounts of sulfur dioxide. And a lot of producers don't want to be called natural wine producers for their own reasons,
Right.
but they're not so far away anymore.
Right.
And
So,
just culturally, I think because natural wine has tried to knock wine off its pedestal. It's been a model for where wine has to go to appeal to younger people.
I agree with that. In following your career and, in following all your writing, I've sensed the shift, and tell me if I'm correct on this. I sense a shift with you towards what you just mentioned, which is, more varietals. But I also sense a shift with you to wines of more restraint. Um, as I mentioned, thoughtful producers, the type of farming, how they make wine, and all that. Has your palate shifted through the years?
No, I have always preferred those wines, and if you go back to articles I wrote 20 years ago, which specifically looked for more restrained versions of California Chardonnay, Cabernet Sauvignon, Pinot Noir, that were at that time, totally outside the mainstream because they were ignored by the powerful critics of that time.
I think it was like Raj Parr and Jasmine Hirsch. They did something to that.
Well, they did their In Pursuit of Balance, but I'm talking about before that.
Okay.
I was trying to write about producers who, whose styles of wines were distinctly unfashionable. People like Kathy Corson and Maya Kamas and Frog's Leap. These were, people 20 years ago whose wines, whose Cabernets were along classical wines in classical lines, and who did not pursue these sort of the exaggerated styles that were critically rewarded at that time. So no, I would say my palate hasn't changed. I think that if anything, I haven't felt necessary. The world has changed in that time. There are so many different kinds of wine available. And this to me, makes right now, and this has been true for years now, this is the greatest time if you love wine, to be a wine drinker. And this is the great paradox that I'm trying to bridge in my writing. There's a lot of hand wringing in wine right now that's glum and pessimistic and depressed. And yet you have all of these great wines that need to be celebrated and talked about and in the most positive sorts of ways. So I'm trying to, do what I have to do to report the news, but also do what I think I have to do to celebrate the great variety of wines that's available now.
I was going to ask you earlier and I didn't get to it, and you just answered the question. And the question was, after we were talking about, all the tumult of 2025, I was going to ask you, what are some of the positives we should be looking forward to in 2026? And you answered it, just now with what you were saying, with all the wine and how good and everything, which is very encouraging. So I'm glad to hear that. Eric, usually at the end of the year, end with a flurry of columns recommending great wines for various occasions. I notice you recommend all year long, but you seem to get into the holiday and seasonal spirit from Thanksgiving on. In looking forward, your current column discusses 10 wines you should be drinking in 2026. And you talk about wines that have been dismissed, but now deserve some recognition and reconsideration. I want you to tell me about these wines, how you approach selecting these wines, and tell me about some of these wines. And, I'll prompt you a little, because the first wine you talk about is something that, I understood is going out of favor, and that's Bordeaux. And I think you go on to discuss at least another, 10. So tell me a little about that.
Yeah, it always bothers me when people dismiss entire genres of wine. With Bordeaux, that I first noticed that around 15 years ago. There would be sommeliers who just scoff at Bordeaux. There are certainly reasons to criticize regions. Bordeaux, Napa Cabernet, they're kind of in the same bag there. I know plenty of people who refuse to drink California Chardonnay because they've got an idea that all California Chardonnays conform to an image they had 20 years ago. Merlot was killed, famously by Sideways, and but there are worthwhile. I shouldn't say worthwhile. There are damn good California Merlots being made right now. Fortified wines, they're kind of those are more lifestyle things, and sweet wines as well. Sauterne, you can't sell Sauterne, but these are fabulous wines. Predicate Riesling. Uh, Even people in Germany don't drink it. Most of it gets exported. But these are brilliant, historically brilliant wines. Excuse me. And they're just so good. And it's one thing if people try them and it's just not for them. I'm not forcing people to drink anything. I just don't want people to categorically reject wines without having really explored them.
Right. So when you mentioned Bordeaux and then you brought Napa Cab right up, I'm just curious, is one of the issues price? Is it quality? Is it the combination of quality of price? What are their reasons there?
It's I think there are several reasons. If you remember, Bordeaux and Napa Cabernet, and I'll throw one more in that category that I didn't write about, Chateauneuf-du-Pape. Right. These were all associated with Robert Parker. And when you began to have a backlash against Parker, beginning 15 years or so ago, these were wines that people just rejected. Right. We're not going to drink Bordeaux here. We're all about Burgundy, where Parker wasn't allowed to review. I would put another one in that I didn't include it in this category, but and it's not associated with Parker, but Big House champagnes. Right. I've written about that before when grower producers became very popular. You'd go into all these really good restaurants, and there would be not a champagne from a Big House at all. Right. And I'm not saying, by any stretch that all big houses are good, but there are certainly more than a handful that are making great wines, and they shouldn't be rejected because of some romantic ideal of the grower producer.
Right. I mean, is it fair to say like a Roederer does a good job as a pretty big house? They farm biodynamically. I mean,
that's a classic example of one of the most forward-thinking people. I say this as somebody who loves grower producers. They've transformed the entire category of champagne, and champagne is nothing like it was 25 years ago because of grower producers. And I will say, because Bordeaux fell out of favor, you're seeing like a lot of new energy in the category of Bordeaux. And with each of these categories, I made some recommendations of wines that I think anybody would like, especially if they think they don't like, Bordeaux or sherry or Sauvignon is one I included because it's one that just nobody ever thinks about.
Right.
But these are great wines.
Yeah, I'm glad you listed that. You mentioned Parker before. I'm not sure this is the right word or word selection, but is there sort of an unraveling of, kind of what he built up? Or is the market for what he pushed people towards, is that, diminishing a little?
I absolutely think so. I mean, I think, Robert Parker had a lot, great salutary influence on wine when I was getting into it in the 1980s. But later on, in the 2000s, he became sort of grouchy and peevish, and anything that didn't conform to his very narrow definition of what great wine was, he lashed out at, and I think that drove a lot of people away. The arrival of what people our age at one time called high-speed internet to differentiate it from those dial-in modems of the 90s. Bloggers, all of it allowed blogging. It allowed many more points of view than just the centralized critics who wrote in their specialized publications. And so, the idea that one or two critics could kind of dictate what styles were acceptable dissolved. And you saw that from, like the late no, I don't ever know what you call the 2000, the first decade of the 2000s. But beginning then, and then he retired, and younger people just they're much more interested in crowdsourcing and God help us, AI nowadays. And I think the wine world today is better for not having somebody, dismissing large segments of it because it didn't happen to conform to his very narrow taste.
Well said, Eric. Very, very sort of on the mark and on all of that. Eric, we got to wrap up. I could stay on with you for hours. But
we got a lot to talk about, Sam.
I know. We always do. We may have to do this at the end of the year, too. Let me do a quick wrap up. I want to get some info from you, and then we'll say goodbye. So thanks for listening. If you'd like to contact the Wine List, we are at sam@thegrapenation.com. That's sam@thegrapenation.com. The Wine List is available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, or wherever you get your pods. Please subscribe to the podcast and leave a review if you like what you hear. Follow us on Instagram at @benrubi, on X @benrubi, and on Facebook at The Grape Nation. I'll post, as I mentioned, Eric's wine list picks and any wines we discussed on our social media sites. Eric, remind everyone when and where we could find your writings, and also where we could find you on social media.
I'm in the New York Times now. after many decades of a weekly column, I'm every 2 weeks.
Okay, I'm glad.
And you can find it on nytimes.com or in the printed newspaper if you're still reading that.
Okay.
And if you don't know when it comes out, if you follow me on Instagram at Eric Asimov, I'll always post a new column when it comes out with a link.
Okay. That's great. And remember, if you like the podcast, please subscribe to the Wine List on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or like I said, wherever you get your pods. To my Heritage Radio subscribers, please resubscribe to your favorite podcast provider. I want to thank our guest, Eric Asimov. I want to thank him for coming on this time every year and really helping us get into things with his insight. Thank you to our engineer, Armin, and to Willie Soul for our new original theme music. I'm Sam Benrubi, and you just got this week's Wine List. Thanks for listening to Heritage Radio Network, food radio supported by you. Keep in touch at heritageradionetwork.org/subscribe.